What up, Mets fans? It's your boy CP from the CP New York Sports Network YouTube channel, back with another episode of the True Mets Talk podcast. Today, we're going to be continuing to talk about the 2023-2024 MLB offseason as it pertains to the New York Mets. On this episode, we'll be talking strictly about the starting pitching market, who's left available and who's already signed. As always, before we get into it, make sure that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, bottom right-hand corner, hover over my icon. Don't even have to deviate away from the video. Hit that subscribe button. Tell your friends, tell your family, and leave your thoughts and comments down below about anything that I talk about today. I'm recording this on November 28th. Tonight, the Mets Roundtable podcast goes live at 7 p.m. on the channel. I'll be joining other Mets content creators. My guy, Amish Country Mets fan Nelson, talking Mets with Rob, and Mets Talk with Hayden, discussing everything pertaining to the Mets pitching situation, the offense, the lineup, Juan Soto, etc. But in this episode, we'll be strictly talking about pitching. And also, you know where to find me at CPNY Sports, X, Twitter, whatever you want to say, Instagram, YouTube, all that good stuff. CPNY Sports all around. Tell your friends, tell your family. Let's get into some Mets talk today. All right, so before we get into it, what really inspired me to make this video, I'm not going to lie to you, because it has been a little bit of a slow offseason start for the New York Mets, which is perfectly okay in my book, is that I see a lot of people on Mets Twitter that I follow or just happen to see their tweets come up on my timeline, is the sentiment that the New York Mets are falling behind in terms of getting this rotation back in order. Obviously, the Mets need to do a lot of work. I understand the sentiment and the fears of Mets fans thinking that the Mets aren't going to be as active as initially thought in this offseason, but I beg to differ. I'm taking a completely different stance. The Mets cannot afford to not be active in this free agent market, whether it be the offense or whether it be the pitching, bullpen, what have you. There's so many holes on this team. You talk about DH, left field, third base, whatever have you, bullpen especially, and starting pitching especially. Now, today we're going to be talking about the starting pitching market, obviously, but I just am here to tell you, Mets fans, if you are on that boat and you're worrying about the Mets getting off to a quote-unquote slow start, because that's not even what I'll call it, take a breath and calm down. Everything's going to be okay. We've seen some starting pitchers already come off the market. You can see to the right here on my right, signed pitchers so as far as starting pitchers go, Aaron Nola returning to the Phillies on a 7-year deal. I don't think anybody thought he would be going anywhere else. That just seemed like the perfect fit for him, and they lock him up long term. Kenta Maeda goes over to the Detroit Tigers. Not worried about that at all. And the Cardinals, for lack of a better term, are now the Mets 2.0 in that rotation. They signed Sonny Gray, Lance Lynn, and Kyle Gibson, all veterans of the MLB, to bolster up their rotation. And I see a lot of Mets fans particularly upset about this because I guess the popular target there for their liking was Sonny Gray. It just never seemed like the perfect fit for Sonny Gray to be in New York after his tenure with the Yankees. It seemed like there was no way he was coming back to New York. The Cardinals lock him up on a 3-year deal. He is 34 years old. I'm not sure if I saw an opt-out, whether it be a team or player opt-out there somewhere in between, but they lock him up for 3 years, $75 million, which I guess is a bargain from what you get or for what you get from Sonny Gray. But at the end of the day, the Mets have bigger fish to fry. There's bigger fish in this free agent market that the Mets are going to be going after. You can bet your bottom dollar about that. So, like I said, this is going to be a really short video. I just want to get this out there to help relieve some of the stress and the tension that I'm seeing on my timeline, because really, I'm not worried, and neither should you. David Stearns is going to build this rotation. He's always had a solid rotation out there in Milwaukee, and he's going to do the same for the New York Mets. It's a little bit of a different ball game for the New York Mets, and if you're in a bigger market in baseball in general, there are certain dominoes that have to fall for the rest of the free agent market to sort of start making their way. Like there's that one domino that needs to fall before everything else falls into place. and we'll talk about that right now, and he's at the top of the screen. That one domino that the big fish of the MLB, the Mets, the Yankees, the Dodgers potentially as well are waiting for is Yoshinobu Yamamoto, projected to get north of $200 million, which is absolutely insane for a pitcher who hasn't thrown a single pitch in the MLB just yet. 24-year-old Japanese phenom Yoshinobu Yamamoto is drawing a lot of interest, and the Mets are one of those teams that are highly speculated to be in on him. Um, I think that Yoshinobu Yamamoto and his situation is really what's holding up the rest of the free agent market. Like I said, the names that we just saw on the screen before, it is what it is. If you're mad about the Mets not getting Sonny Gray, that's one thing. Personally, I'm not too upset about it. I could do without Sonny Gray. Yes, he would have been a great filler for maybe a 3, the 3rd spot right before Jose Quintana in this rotation, but I am not losing sleep on Sonny Gray whatsoever. The Cardinals clearly had their cheap plan. Obviously, $75 million isn't too cheap, but Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson were a little bit on the cheaper side. If you wanted the Mets to go that route, more power to you. Like I said, the Mets have bigger fish to fry. Yoshinobu Yamamoto is one of those big fish in the pond. He's going to get a mega deal. Strictly speaking, in terms of the payroll, you need to wait on a Yoshinobu Yamamoto decision before you can make a move elsewhere, whether it be free agency or trade. So let's continue to wait on Yoshinobu Yamamoto. I believe he is fielding calls with teams at the moment, and his decision is supposed to be coming in, I believe, within the next 40 days or so as well. This is a marathon, not a race. I will continue to stress that. Yoshinobu Yamamoto, these top two guys on the screen right here are what I personally want on my wish list, and I do think it's feasible. If the Mets go out there and get Yoshinobu Yamamoto and Eduardo Rodriguez, you have a solid, a elite rotation for the foreseeable future. I'm talking about for the next 4 to 5 years, you have Senga, Eduardo Rodriguez, and Yoshinobu Yamamoto all locked up. Jose Quintana will be serving for one more year as the 4th man in the rotation. And then you can go ahead and plug and play internally who's going to be filling in for that 5th and 6th spot. You also maybe could get Seth Lugo back on a bargain deal if he chooses to return to New York. Familiar face there is also on the market down below. An underrated signing that honestly I would love to see happen if you're planning for 2025 more so than 2024 is Brandon Woodruff. He's not going to be pitching in 2024. A surprise non-tender by the Milwaukee Brewers letting him go. He is a free agent, won't be pitching in 2024. But if I am wrong, and if the Mets plan truly is to be competitive in 2025, and I'm not saying if they choose to prioritize 2025, they're not going to be competitive and vying for a playoff spot in 2024. I'm just talking about strictly the dollar value spending amount. Then Brandon Woodruff would make sense. You got other cheap options here as well. Luis Severino, Tyler Mahle are two options that are going to be probably on bargain side of the deal. Luis Severino coming off of an off year, and Tyler Mahle coming off of Tommy John surgery presumably will get you a cheap option. Both of those guys on the bottom end of the rotation would be awesome to see. I think the bridges are burned with Marcus Stroman, but he did opt out of his deal as well, making him a free agent. And Jordan Montgomery, I strictly do not trust in terms of what he's going to be asking for pitching wise. I think if you want to go with a lefty, you go with Eduardo Rodriguez. Now, what's not pictured on here, because the only guys that I said on here are the free agents. I did not list any trade candidates. Dylan Cease has a lot is drawing a lot of interest. And unfortunately, from what I've been hearing and the reports surrounding Dylan Cease is that the Atlanta Braves are one of those teams interested in Dylan Cease. Now, if you listened to this podcast before, if you've listened to the Mets Roundtable podcast, you know that I value Dylan Cease a lot. And I would love nothing more than the Mets to go in and swoop in and make a trade for Dylan Cease, because I think that if you put Senga, Yamamoto, and obviously I'm filling in Yamamoto, presumably if, and that's only if the Mets get him, and Cease as your top 3, That is probably the best top 3 that you will find in the MLB. I firmly believe that. Senga, Cease, and Yamamoto would do absolute wonders in Queens. Now, I know that's a little bit of a long shot, and if you go that route, you have to part ways with maybe 1 or 2 of your personal favorite prospects. We all have our reservations about that, but we've seen how the prospects have panned out recently for the New York Mets. You talk about Brett Beatty got off to a slow start. Obviously, Francisco Alvarez is going to be the catcher to stay, but he cooled off toward the end of the season. Ronnie Mauricio still a question mark. So the prospects don't always pan out. And I'm not one to be a prospect hugger for that very reason. If you have a solidified starting pitcher that you can plug in right behind Kodai Senga or Yamamoto, if you sign him, you go ahead and make that trade. We didn't talk about Shohei Ohtani. I talked about him on one of my previous True Mets Talk podcast episodes. Make sure you go and rewind to go and look back and see what I said about Shohei Ohtani. But I am not expecting Shohei Ohtani to be a New York Met, unfortunately. I hate to say it because this would be a generational free agent signing, one of the best in recent memories for the New York Mets. I just cannot see it happening, especially with what he's going to be wanting dollar value. Now, I'm not saying that Steve Cohen wouldn't pony up that kind of money for Shohei Ohtani and the caliber player that he is. All I'm saying is that the amount of holes that the Mets have in this roster so far going into 2024, you have to play the strategic game of filling and plugging all of those holes. Now, we'll see what the dynamic is between filling those holes internally or externally with the likes of prospects versus free agents versus trades. That's a whole different ballgame within itself, and David Stearns has plenty of options to go about whichever route he chooses to do so. All I'm saying is that there's plenty of options in terms of starting pitching for the New York Mets. And I didn't even mention Shota Imanga, who also just recently got posted. Crafty left-hander. If you strike out on a guy like Eduardo Rodriguez, if you don't trust a guy like Jordan Montgomery to give a long-term deal to, Shota Imanga for a nice little 3 to 4 year deal would be absolutely perfect. I like his stuff. I like everything that I've saw out of Shota Imanga from his highlight tape. So, like I said, there's plenty of options, Mets fans. Let's go back to this graphic. These guys don't move and don't thread the needle for the New York Mets to become a contender that we all want this team to be. Aaron Nola, potentially. Sonny Gray, if he came to New York, there'd be a lot more work left to do in this rotation. But you see the names on this list, it's extensive. And this list isn't even limited to these guys. This is all I could just fit on the graphic. There's more pitchers out there, maybe toward the lower end of the rotation, but there's a lot of different avenues the Mets can go down. And like I said, I'm going to keep stressing this. The domino that the whole entire league is waiting to fall is Yoshinobu Yamamoto to see where he signs. And I firmly believe that the New York Mets are going to be the front runners to sign him. Now, like I said, there's no guarantees. There's no guarantees. We don't know if there's geographic preferences. There's a lot of speculation about his preferences between playing with another Japanese star versus not. You have Seiya Suzuki on the Cubs. You have a couple Japanese players over there in Boston. They're probably going to be in the mix as well for the services of Yoshinobu Yamamoto. And you have Kodai Senga for the New York Mets, who apparently has been pushing for the Mets to sign Yoshinobu Yamamoto, and rightfully so. That would be an electric 1-2 at the top of the rotation for the New York Mets and Queens. But like I said, Mets fans, do not worry. I trust in David Stearns. His track record in terms of the starting pitching rotation in Milwaukee speaks for itself. He's going to plug the necessary holes in this rotation. Right now, Kodai Senga and Jose Quintana is all we got. So if you're a Mets fan thinking that the Mets are going to sort of not go after those top dogs, if you're thinking that they're going to take the cheap way out, more power to you. I respectfully disagree. That is not how I'm evaluating this offseason whatsoever. So we'll remain to see what happens on the hot stove. We'll see who the next domino is to fall out of the group of guys that are on this list to my right. Like I said, this has been the True Mets Talk podcast. If I had my wish list to leave you all here with the last little nugget of my idea, those top two guys, you give me Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who's going to get that mega deal. You get Eduardo Rodriguez maybe on a 4-year, let's call it $80 million, $85 million deal, potentially even 90. The Mets can swing for 4 years. You lock up those top three in Senga, Yamamoto, Rodriguez for the next 4 to 5 years. You're set. You're golden. You got Quintana services for another year. You can go out and sign Seth Lugo maybe to a cheap deal, Tyler Mahle, Luis Severino to a cheap deal. You got Mike Vasil coming up, or you can wait for a guy like Blade Tidwell, Christian Scott, etc. when they're ready. And you got Joey Lucchesi there. Also, probably going to be in this rotation if they go 6-man, which I highly believe they will, at least to start the season. So many options, guys. Be patient. Trust in David Stearns. Trust in Steve Cohen. They will get this ship right. I promise you. This has been the True Mets Talk podcast with your boy CP. Like I said, follow me on Instagram and X. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, bottom right-hand corner of this video. Hit that subscribe button for more hot stove updates. Hit that thumbs up. Support the podcast. Make sure you're tuning in to the Mets Roundtable podcast tonight. The link to that stream at 7 p.m. on November 28th tonight is going to be in the description. Make sure you navigate down there as well. I appreciate all the support. Subscribe to the channel. Till next time, guys. See you all later, and let's go Mets. Thank you for watching the latest episode of the CP New York Sports Pod. If you enjoyed this content, make sure you hit that thumbs up, comment your thoughts and opinions, and use the lower right-hand button of this video to subscribe to the channel. Thank you.